Everyone. As mentioned, this webinar will be recorded. I just want to give everybody a warm welcome. I know always hope to meet everybody under warmer circumstances. As mentioned, today is National Fentanyl Awareness Day. But with that also being said, today we're also going to talk about different issues that we also see with different types of drugs. So really important here when we talk about this subject is what it means and how it affects every single individual. We're going to do a PowerPoint, but right now I'm just kind of giving a quick introduction. So nobody's screen is faulting or no one's screen is broken. Really important. One of the big things that we've seen over the last few years has been emotional or some type of feeling from a lot of students. I speak to a lot of middle school, a lot of high school students, some elementary students, and a lot of them are reporting issues with emotions, issues with feelings, not knowing how to convey those feelings, not knowing how to actually ask for help, right? So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about drugs. We're going to talk about a kind of a holistic approach to that and kind of give some information for you all as adults. I don't know if there's any youth on this call. I don't think so. If there is, this is definitely a presentation for parents. I also want to stress that this information is pertinent right now, but 6 months from now, we could have a whole new trend or we could have a whole new thing going on that we're talking about. So with that being said, I am going to try to share my screen. I know it's been years of doing this, but we still have some issues sometimes with the computers. So let's see if this wants to cooperate with me today. So thumbs up. Can everyone see that? Or at least German,
Yes.
He can kind of see it. I don't know. I can't see everyone else. So my name is Jorge Casillas. I work here at the San Jose Police Department. I work over at the Crime Prevention Unit. Our job at the Crime Prevention Unit is to do a whole bunch of different community education. So earlier today, I was talking to some middle school students. And before that, last week, I was talking to high school students and high school parents and a whole bunch of different administrators. So when we talk about drugs, for some people, it might be the first time to hear about drugs. It might be the first time they have a conversation about it. So this slide is just a quick little primer. There's a few chemicals in the brain that get triggered or a few pathways in the brain that get worked on when we're talking about drugs and alcohol. So let's get started with the most basics of basics, right? So if we're going to give this information, we need to have everyone start at a baseline. So really quick. What is addiction and what is not addiction? So the actual definition of an addict is someone who devotes or gives oneself habitually to something or compulsively. So I always ask everyone, raise your hand if you know somebody who has to have a cup of coffee every day. And if they don't have the cup of coffee, they woke up on the wrong side of the bed. So raise your hand if you know anybody like that, right? I know a couple people like that. Raise your hand if you know a teenager who every few seconds or every few minutes is compulsively checking their cell phone because they think it vibrated in their pockets, they got the ghost vibrations, or they're constantly on their phone and they're always on it, even though there's nothing to really do on it, and they're just scrolling through mindlessly, right? So those are different types of addictions. Addictions come in a whole bunch of different shapes, forms, and sizes. You have people who have an addiction to working out. You have people who have an addiction to spending money, a whole bunch of different stuff. And we could go on for hours and hours and hours naming all of these different types. When we talk about drug addiction, especially when we talked about youth, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, so NIDA, labels it basically the same thing. And really important here is despite harmful consequences. Now, this is really important when we talk to our youth. Before I worked here at the police department, I used to work as a residential rehab counselor. And we would get youth that would come into our rehab or they would come into our program and they would say, well, I don't have a problem. It's you all that have a problem. You grown-ups are the ones that put me here. You're the reason why I have a problem because you said I have a problem. And we would say, well, okay, I understand that. That's reasonable that you say that. It's your feelings, it's your emotions. That's where you're at right now in the state. So let me ask you, have you missed school? Well, yeah. And you know, well, it's their fault for getting me in trouble because if they wouldn't have marked me tardy or if they wouldn't have marked me late, you know, I wouldn't have been in trouble. Okay, well, do you have a job? Well, I had a job, but I couldn't keep the job because they wanted me to show up on time. And, you know, that kind of messes with my schedule, right? So harmful consequences or consequences come in a bunch of different shapes, forms, and sizes. And it's really important when we talk to youth that when we talk about consequences, we don't say, well, 20 years from now, right? Because youth, if you say 20 years from now, most of them are going to look at you and say, what are you talking about? 20 years from now, I don't even know if I'll be alive to 21. So what do you mean 20 years from now? What does that even mean? So it's about a lot of the times when you're talking to youth, especially younger youth between the ages of 12 to 15, it's definitely about shorter term, 2-3 years into the future, right? So when you're a senior, where do you see yourself? Do you see yourself going to a college or university? What does that look like? If you're going to go into a trade program or you're going to start working, what does that look like? How does that look like when you're working? If you're working with your hands, could you be under the influence and be doing something with your hands, right? So breaking that down into more of a concept, more concrete than an overarching goal. For those of you that might be social workers or people that are into diagnosing people, we have a book called the DSM-5, which helps diagnose people. Substance use disorder is kind of the overarching diagnosis. Now, when we talk about the brain, especially when we talk about the brain of young people, their brain is a little different than ours as adults. Not in the sense that it's two completely different systems or two completely different brains. It's just, it's wiring up. So a young person, their prefrontal cortex, which is that purple part of the brain, completely wires up or finishes wiring up. So all the little neural connections, they start connecting or they finish connecting around 23 to 25. I always tell young people, and they get a kick out of this, young ladies actually develop around 20 to 23. Women do develop faster than males, and all the young kids get a kick out of that because it's true. Women do develop and they mature faster than males. With that, we know that the prefrontal cortex controls a whole bunch of stuff. You can see it on this chart, and this is just a kind of a glimmer of what it connects. So it does the reward and the motivation. It does pleasure, euphoria, things that make you feel good, motor functioning, compulsion, preservation. So preserving yourself. That's why young people sometimes will say, hey, I think it's a good idea to get into a shopping cart and go down a really big hill. When the rest of us as adults would say, you really think that's a good idea? And they say, yeah, you know how much fun we're going to have? And for us, we're thinking, what if you break your leg? How are you going to pay your bills? I mean, you might have a mortgage. How are you going to pay your mortgage if you break your leg, right? So we kind of think of all these things, and a young person says, no. Let's just do it. It's going to be fun. It's going to be great, right? And that's just because their brain is developing at a different pace and a different level. So it's really important when you talk to youth that you talk to them and you explain to them these issues of their brain developing. One of the big things that we know about youth is youth don't want to feel like they're less than others, right? We know that that's one of the things that helps youth kind of deal with some of these issues, framing it in a sense that them using or them consuming products will actually be a detriment to them. We know that a lot of youth really don't like that, and that's something that really helps get in this conversation with them. Now, when we talk about an addiction cycle, or when we talk about dopamine releasing or serotonin, which is the thing that makes us feel good, what does that look like? So my parents are from Mexico. I was born here in the United States, but my parents are from Mexico. They're from a state called Michoacan. One of the things that happens is my mom makes tamales. So she makes tamales once a year, only once a year for Christmas. And that's it. She does not make them. It doesn't matter if it's someone's wedding, someone's sweet 15, not even for my wedding. So it doesn't matter. She's only making them once a year. My brain goes through this cycle and it remembers, okay, come November, I start feeling happier. Come November, I start feeling better. I start feeling good because I know come December, I'm going to get my tamales that I've been waiting for a whole year. I build up. I start having these cravings. I start feeling like, hey, I'm going to have this. I eat them, which is the using, the ritual, right? Because there's usually a whole thing of helping my mom make them. We put them, we cook them, we do all that. There's a whole bunch of letting them sit before you eat them because they might be too hot. They might burn you. The dough isn't firm enough. A whole bunch of stuff happens. And then I eat them and they're really good. And then after about 2 weeks, after eating about 100 of them, I say, you know, I don't think I want these anymore. I'm kind of over it. I don't really want to eat them anymore. Now, when I say that, what I'm trying to say is drugs and alcohol kind of function the same way. We know that individuals that are craving or individuals that are wanting to use, they typically go through a cycle. We know that they typically have the emotional trigger, which could be as simple as a song that comes up on the radio. It could be something that reminds them of a situation. It could be something that reminds them of the last time they used, or maybe the last time that they were with people that were using. They get a craving. Typically, most cravings last about 5 or 7 minutes. We know that if you can distract someone or if you can help someone think of something else or do something else for about 5 to 10 minutes after the hard craving, after the trigger, and they recognize the trigger and they get a craving, if you can distract them for about 5 to 10 minutes, for most people, you can get them to not use. And that's really important because when we talk about youth and pro-social activities, we know those are the things that really help them stay sober and not have these issues with drugs and alcohol. Pro-social activities. So when we talk about that is distracting them. So if it's finding different types of coping mechanisms, we know that coping mechanisms come in a whole bunch of different shapes, forms, and sizes. It could be them doing exercise. It could be them gardening, poetry, a whole bunch of different stuff. The ritual is the actual part where if they weren't able to stop the craving, now they move on to the ritual. So for adults, that could look like, hey, I get paid every 2 weeks. On Friday, I go to the same parking lot. I go to the same liquor store. I walk down the same aisle. I open up the same fridge. I stand in the same line at the 7-Eleven or whatever it might be. I have the same small chit chat that I have with that person. I go home and I do whatever I do and they use. What we see with a lot of youth and also with a lot of people that have problems with drugs and alcohol is that feeling of guilt. And especially with youth, right? Because youth, they'll tell you, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. And then they do it and then they feel worse or they feel guilt, right? Because they say, well, I told my parents, I signed a contract. I told them I wasn't going to do this, but I still did it anyways. And I don't know why I did it. And I don't know how to tell my parents because now they're going to be disappointed with me. They're going to feel bad. They're going to feel sad. They might even be angry at me. What does that look like? And for a lot of them, that's why we always say, right? If your youth is having these issues, at the end of this presentation, we're going to give some resources to some phone numbers you can call for some help. I know that the school district also has counselors and different people that you can reach out to because there's a lot of resources out there. And we obviously at the police department don't do counseling, but we do give this information out so you can reach these groups. So really important when we talk to parents or when we talk to anyone who deals with drugs and alcohol. What do drugs and alcohol look like? What do they do? What don't they do? So the overarching information here pretty much holds. Some of these drugs change in and out between what youth are using, what youth aren't using, what is popular with them, what isn't popular. In Santa Clara County, for adults, we definitely see a big usage of methamphetamines, at least in the city of San Jose. That's a big problem. Fentanyl is an up and coming problem, definitely when we talk about youth and young people using them kind of for fun or using them for experimentations. Marijuana is another one. We're going to talk about that today. But it's really important for everyone when we talk about marijuana. What does that mean or what does that look like? Because there's different shapes, forms, and sizes and different ways of intaking these products when we talk about that. So first things first, alcohol. We're gonna do some information and then go from there. So this data is still pretty much there. The last time they updated, I think, was 2018, but roughly 1 in every 10 person who consumes alcohol will become an alcoholic. This is important when we talk to youth because a lot of the times they say 1 in 10. Okay, well, that's no big deal. But then when you get a room of 30 to about 40 students, you say three or four out of the people in this class will have a problem with alcohol if they start consuming alcohol. And then they kind of start saying, okay, yeah, that's kind of a problem, right? So really important. There's no safe level of alcohol to consume for anyone under the age of 21. 21 is the legal age to consume alcohol. One of the things that we're seeing with young people is I think a lot of providers have spent a good amount of time talking about marijuana, vaping, and some of the things that we're going to talk about here tonight. And we've seen some youth actually start consuming some alcohol just because they say, well, if people aren't telling us it's bad, how bad can it really be, right? Us as adults assuming that they understand the concept that, hey, alcohol is pretty bad for your brain and pretty bad for you as a person. When we talk about vapes or when we talk about some of this information, because this is something that we see with a lot of youth, right? A lot of consuming these vape products. What does this actually mean? What does this look like? What are we talking about here? So really important when young people say vapes, they're not talking about water vapor. When they say juice or e-juice, they're not talking about juice. When they're talking about juice, they're talking about these oils. These are all oils. So inside of these cartridges or inside of these pods is an oil-based substance. So kind of like cooking oil. If you ever have it in your hand, it's kind of like cooking oil. They refill these cartridges, or in the case of this puff bar, which is popular with the youth, they come in an all-in-one disposable product. What do we know about these is flavors are what attract youth. These are all oil-based systems. When they smoke these products, typically what ends up happening is the battery will send an electrical current to these little connectors. The oil's inside of the pod. The oil will be burned by this metal rod From there, it gets burned because it's a thick, oily substance. It actually starts coating their mouth, their throat, their lungs, through their intestinal system, and it finally comes out on the other side when they go to the restroom. What do I mention when I say water vapor? This is what most people think of. They think of that tea kettle, right? It's a water vapor. It must go up. It must be made out of water. Vape. In reality, what we know is it's actually more like that spray. It's more like hairspray. It's kind of a thick substance that tends to fall to the ground, and it coats, as mentioned earlier, the throat, the mouth, and all the different things that it goes into. Flavors are what really attract youth, so that's really important. Some of you might be wondering, well, what does that mean? So there was a few laws that were passed. So 21 is the legal age to consume or use these products. Flavored vapes typically only come in the oils, or they come in the disposable vapes. The company like Jules and those, they're not really allowed to sell flavored products anymore. So what do we know is that youth are using those disposable vapes. What do they look like, or what do they do? They work just like a regular vape, except they're disposable. So instead of having a rechargeable battery or having a refillable cartridge, it's all in one system. It looks like that, like a little USB, and then they just basically throw it in the trash. They have about 250 usage, and then after that, they have to throw them away. Some youth are reporting that they're buying them for anywhere between $8 to $10, sometimes a little more. It just depends on where they get them from. Now, what does this mean, or what does this look like? What we know is when we're talking about cigarette usage, people who consume large amounts of cigarettes, so a chain smoker, I think we're all grown-ups here, so we know that term, right? Chain smoker. They smoke anywhere between 1 to 2 packs a day. What young people are telling us, or what they've told different providers and different people, is that they're consuming anywhere between 1 to 2 of these puff bars on a 1.5 to 2 day basis. So they're smoking twice to sometimes up to 3 times as many nicotine worths of products when they're consuming these products. Now, what do we mean when we say that? Because some people say, well, how is that possible? How is this happening? How can they be smoking? So nicotine is a dopamine releaser. Dopamine, as I mentioned earlier, is a thing that makes you feel good. So think of anything that makes you feel good. If it's exercising, if it's reading a book, whatever it is that makes you feel good, think about getting that on a consistent basis and always kind of feeling a buzz or always feeling good. And that's what young people are saying, that's why they use these. Really important as well. A lot of these products, because they release a pretty small plume of smoke, it's not always a big plume of smoke like you might see with some of these other tank-based systems. So youth might be doing it in the restrooms. They might be doing it as they're walking from class to class. And for the most part, there's nothing that tells them how much they've smoked, right? Like when you smoke a cigarette, you finish the cigarette, you're done. When they smoke these, they just keep puffing and puffing and puffing and puffing. Kind of easy to hide these. You can put them in your sweater. You can put them in a whole bunch of different stuff. Now, marijuana. Or Herman, do you have a question?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat. I just want to, is CBD legal to help treat anxiety in teens?
Sorry, did you say CBD?
CBD, yeah, that's a question regarding CBD.
So you kind of led me into my my next point. So yeah, so marijuana. We get a lot of questions about this. What does that look like? What is it? So this topic by itself could be a 3 to 5 hour long conversation. What I will say is it has to be 21 or over to consume these products. Federally, it's still illegal. So if you have marijuana in your pocket and you're not at the airport, the only law, if you're under 21, that's California law. As soon as you walk through the airport and you start going to TSA checkpoints, you have now committed a federal crime because it's federally illegal. And a whole bunch of things come along with that, right? Financial aid, acceptance to possibly being in the military, for individuals who are going through immigration issues, a whole bunch of different stuff could happen, right? So it's important to understand that concept. THC and CBD in the state of California are sometimes used as prescription drugs. Now, what does that mean? It means that someone who's under the age of 21, they still, especially if they're under 18, there has to be a consent form. There has to be a whole bunch of different stuff. CBD that's actually used for medicinal purposes is not the CBD that you see at the convenience store or even at some of your mom and pop big box stores. That is a whole different conversation, but you need to know that that is actually a hemp-based CBD. And there was a 2018 farm bill that was passed that allowed a lot of individuals to sell CBD medicine that's actually derived from the hemp plant and not from cannabis sativa plant, which is a different type of CBD. As mentioned, that this could be going on for 3 or 5 hours, but important for you to know that for it to be a prescription grade CBD or prescription grade marijuana medicine, there still needs to be some type of referral. There still needs to be some type of prescription. And for it to be medicine, it does not have to get you high. Really important for young people and especially for you as adults to understand that it does not have to get you high. The amount of THC that's in some of that medicinal CBD is very, very small, to the point where most people that use it after a while, they can't even feel the THC that's in there. So when we talk about this, what does this look like? What is it? So when we talk to adults, this is what they think marijuana is: a plant, a joint. They think about Cheech and Chong. They think about the doobies. What other references can I make? Eating tacos at late night at Jack in the Box. A whole bunch of different stuff. When we talk to youth, this is what they say to us is marijuana. This is what they say is marijuana. This is what they say is marijuana. If this was a normal meeting presentation, I would ask, who knows what this is? But because it's a webinar, I'm just gonna assume that most people are probably saying, what is this guy showing us? So this is actually what young people call wax and dabs. This is a concentrate that's derived from the THC plant. I am not going to go into the process of how this is made because I am not here to teach you how to make drugs. But what I will say is that this is derived from all the different parts of the marijuana plant that people don't smoke. So what does this look like, or what is this? It looks like an oil. It looks almost like a vape. The big distinction here is that you'll see that a lot of these products are actually have an oily kind of golden color. Definitely don't put these on your hands and don't touch them because it will seep through your skin. We're also going to talk about that with fentanyl. But these are typically oil-based systems. When people talk about smoking vape marijuana, you're definitely not going to have that big odor stench of people when they would smoke cannabis or when they would smoke marijuana. It's not really as strong, or it's not really there. These effects happen pretty quickly when they smoke vapes. Typically anywhere between 10 to 30 seconds, they'll start feeling an effect of it, which is completely different than edibles. And we're going to talk about that. And how does this look, or what does this consumption look like? So a lot of wax paper. That's one of the signs that you know that they might be using these, because it doesn't stick to wax paper. Silicone balls. So if you see a lot of silicone, that's another indicator that they might be using these products because it doesn't stick to silicone. So bouncy balls, silicone, anything, that's kind of a sign there. High consumption of water. The body starts to dehydrate, so they want to drink a lot of water. These torches. If your kid is not in a cooking class, start asking some questions, because these torches are used to warm up or heat up this metal component, which most young people will call a nail. It kind of looks, if you've ever seen old traditional marijuana bongs, it kind of looks the same. The difference is this metal component. That gooey substance that I showed you earlier, what they called wax or dab, this is actually it being burned in that image. As you can see, it's not as big as it looked in the zoomed up picture, right? So really, really important when you look, or when you're trying to see, hey, is my young person using these? What does it look like? So just really important. Edibles have a delayed effect. So edibles could take 30 minutes up to 2 to 3 hours for it to start having effect. Edibles come in a whole bunch of different shapes, forms, and sizes. They come as cookies, gummy bears, drinks, whole bunch of different stuff. Really important to know is that one of the cookies is traditionally or normally going to feed more than one person. So it could be 5 people, it could be 10 people, but it's usually made for more than one person. What we see from young people is they eat a piece of the cookie, they wait about 5 minutes, and they say nothing's happened because it takes 30 minutes up to an hour to take effect. They say, I don't think that was a real edible. Yeah, well, since it's not a real edible, I guess I'll just eat the whole cookie. And then they eat the whole cookie, and then that's when they start having all the issues. So physiological and psychological issues, depending on the individual or depending on the person's history. So it's important to note that, right? We're going to talk about that kind of towards the end of the presentation, about how to also have this conversation with youth and what that looks like. Now, getting into kind of our main topic for today, prescription medications and fake medications, and what young people are somewhat using as a trend that we're seeing. So Xanax was popular pre-pandemic, and it's been popular with the youth. what is this, or what am I? So Xanax is usually a benzodiazepine. It's typically used for anti-anxiety. It's typically used to relax people and calm them down. With that, for those that do not have these issues, what it does is it actually causes severe drowsiness, dizziness, slurred speech. So you'll see them slur their words. So if they're talking to you, it kind of sounds like this. No, I don't know what you're talking about, man. I'm just hanging out, man. I don't know what your problem is. They'll kind of talk to you like that with closed eyes, kind of loopy, loss of coordination. So you'll see them actually fall out of chairs. You'll see them kind of trip over themselves. If they have a cup, sometimes they'll spill the cup or it falls out of their hands. And that's because the CNS, which is the central nervous system, actually starts to shut down. So what ends up happening is when the central nervous system shuts down, the pumping of oxygen in blood starts to actually slow down. When it starts to slow down, that also means that the brain isn't receiving as much oxygen and as much blood as it normally would. With that, obviously, once your brain stops functioning, right, you die. So we've seen overdose cases, and we've seen individuals actually consuming these products. Now, this individual that you see there in the picture, some of you might be wondering, what is that or who is that? So pre-pandemic, which is something that's still kind of carried over, but not as much. The rappers known as Lil rappers were really popular with the youth. Lil Xanax, Lil Yachty, a whole bunch of them. I can go on and on and on. They're all Lil rappers. This young person, his name was Lil Peep. Really sad, right? Because one of the things that we see with young people is the usage of social media. So social media is a conduit for them to get these products, or a conduit for them to explore what these products can do for them. So this young person here actually Instagram videoed himself, if I remember correctly, taking a few of these Xanax pills. And this is actually a still from the video. And this is the one that actually led to his death. So after rapping about all these things and glorifying these things, he ended up doing a video, and this is a still from that day of him actually consuming these products, which led to his passing. When we talk about this, why are we talking about this? Because some of you might be saying, well, why are we talking about this? Because it's something that we see. So what are opioids? Why are they used? How does it affect the body? What are all these things? What are we talking about, right? So opioids typically come from a poppy plant, right? When we talk about heroin, black tar heroin, when we talk about different types of forms of heroin or other forms of drugs, especially in the opioid realm, we talk about a plant. When we talk about fentanyl, for a lot of people, they might not have seen it before. They might not know what it is. So it is an opioid, but it's a synthetic opioid that's technically made in a laboratory. It's man-made through different chemical processes. And then it's typically used for pain relief. So why are people using it? For pain relief, right? So typically people will have maybe back pain, or they'll have an issue. They sell fentanyl patches, and then they put it on themselves, and that typically takes the pain away. That's typically how these medications work. What we're seeing, or what we've seen on the streets, is no longer patches, but these fentanyl being made in large quantities. As has been stated by the DEA, a lot of these medications are coming from south of the border, so they're coming from other countries. They're being brought here. They're mixed. They're put together, concocted together, you can say, and it's brought onto the streets, and kids and young people are consuming them. What does that mean? Is typically in pill format, and that's kind of one of the things that we've seen in Santa Clara County that's affecting a lot of people. So how does it affect the body? Just like the other one, it's the central nervous system, and it also affects the endorphin system. So what does that look like, or what are the issues with this, or why is this a problem, right? Because we see youth experimenting with things that they say are going to make me feel better, things that are going to make me feel good. So as mentioned earlier, the prescription medications are typically prescribed for pain. What happens is slow down of speech, a digestion, heart rate, breathing, overall movement, a whole bunch of different things happen to a person when they consume these products, but typically it's a slowing of the body. So when they reach for something, it's a really slow reach. And we're going to show a video Hopefully it plays because, like I mentioned earlier, with the computer, you never really know. The breathing slows down, overall movement tends to slow down. And that's why a lot of individuals talk about a medication called naloxone or Narcan. That drug, as soon as it enters the body, it counteracts all of the different receptors that are inside of the body, and it actually starts taking those receptors from being impacted with this medication, and it actually brings back people from death. Because I mentioned earlier, right? When your body slows down, when you're not breathing, when your brain shuts off, that's why there's death. Things that you can look out for as an adult, if you're wondering, are they consuming these products? Are they not? There's a constriction of the pupils. So when people use opioids, typically the black parts of their eyes or pupils are going to get pinpoint small. When they smoke methamphetamines, they get really big. And there's nothing that people can really do about that. So that's why if you've ever seen people flash a flashlight in someone's eyes, it's to see if the pupils are moving back and forth. Other things that you can tell. Did I see your hand raised? Good one.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you, but there's a couple of questions here and that I think are, let me see. The first one is, are at-home drug tests accurate? And then the second question was, I think, about the opioids. Can these drugs be laced in marijuana? So those are the two questions that they had.
No worries. So I'll do the first one, and then if I forget the second one, I'll ask you. So at-home drug test. At-home drug test depends on the quality, obviously, and it depends on if the procedure is followed properly. Ask me how I know, because I used to work at a residential rehab. So we would have to test and test people when they would come back from their home passes. So they would get to go home for a few hours. They'd come home. They'd come back home. I say come back home, but it wasn't their home. They'd come back to the house, and we would say, okay, well, you know the deal. Drink your water if you're not ready to go to the restroom. And you know, I'll meet you and stay here. You're not going anywhere. Why do I say that? Because typically the cups will have little ribs or little slats inside of them. And I'm sorry if this is getting a little descriptive, but when the urine, when it hits the cup, if it overwhelms the strip or if it overwhelms the cup, you'll get a false positive or a false negative. One of the things that's also really great about some of these systems is you can actually send in samples. So you send in a sample, there's a fee, obviously, and you can start seeing if there's actually a tapering of the medication inside of the person. So like for THC, people who consume high levels of marijuana, they'll actually test positive for THC in their system for up to 30 days because THC actually gets stuck to someone's fat cells. So if they consume marijuana 3 to 4 times a week, they'll actually be dirty for THC for up to 30 days. Now, what you hope to see and what we should see, right, if they said they stopped usage and they're clean and sober, is that when you do the first test, you should see a high level of THC. And when you get to about 30 days, if they still have some, it should be a very small amount of THC. And that's all done through, right, the testing and sending in the urine, but also making sure that you're getting good samples. So if they're peeing into the strip, if it's not warm enough, I had a few individuals try to pass off someone else's urine as their urine. So you get a lot of different things like that. So it obviously has to be a certain temperature for it to be out of the human body, and the tests have to actually be somewhat accurate. I can't recommend which ones to buy. I can't tell you that because we're not supposed to say things, but I know that a lot of the pharmacy stores sell pretty good products. Right, it's a little different than buying them off of eBay or Amazon, as I've heard from some individuals. The second question was,
can these drugs be laced in marijuana?
Yeah, so there's been a few cases that have been reported from the DEA that fentanyl has actually made its way into some of the marijuana vapes. I can't say that all vapes are going to be laced with fentanyl or laced with some of these drugs, but we have heard reports of some of these out of Southern California with these products being laced in vapes, right? Because if you think about it, if it's a liquid and you're putting it with another liquid, it's not a far stretch to be able to mix these products. What we know is a lot of these drug dealers and a lot of these individuals are just looking to make a profit. They're just looking to make a buck off of a kid. They're not really concerned on if this person's going to live or not live. That's not really their main concern, right? And I think that's important when we talk to youth to explain that to them, that these drug dealers and these individuals are not your friends. They're not looking out for your best interest. And if they keep talking to you, it's because they know they're making money off of you. And that's important. When we talk about that at the end, we're going to talk about some of those distinctions. So other things you can look out for, and good questions, everyone. Please keep
And
the
one more,
questions.
Jorge, I think
Uh-huh.
that this one's very important here. How quickly do you need to give the Narcan in order for it to save a person? Is one enough, or does it take multiple doses?
That's a very, very good question. And I don't know who asked that question, but thank you for asking that. Every situation is a little different. What we do know is that for some individuals, they might need 3, 4, sometimes they need 5. Some individuals might be able to take just one Narcan. It just depends on every situation. That's why when we talk, obviously with adults, we ask or we say, is anybody Narcan trained? I know some of the nurses here in Santa Clara County do those trainings. Does anybody have it? I know our officers carry it with them in their bags. And obviously, right, there's more than one officer that typically shows up to a case or a situation. So there's typically more than just one Narcan on scene. So sometimes, yes, it does take 3 or 4. It just depends on how much they took, how long they've been passed out, and how long the effects have been going on in their body. There's a whole different scenarios. But sometimes, yes, it does take more than one. The skin dries out. Typically, when you see people use opioids, they typically have skin drying out, and it's not skin drying out because it's drying out because of all the chemical reactions. What that means is then it leads to excessive itching. So if you've ever seen someone who has an addiction to heroin or opioids, you'll see them with scabs on their bodies, which is different than people having scabs from methamphetamine usage. People having scabs from methamphetamine usage are typically hallucinogenic effects. So they're having some type of hallucinogenic effect or psychological effect. They see something and they're trying to get it out because methamphetamines puts people into a state of euphoria. They're going and going and going and going until they finally, in their mind, get it out, which leads to a scab. With heroin usage, what it ends up happening is you have dry skin. If you've ever gone to the beach and you've ever got a sunburn, same thing. Typically, you're going to do a thing called self-care. So typically, you're going to put aloe vera, suntan lotion. You're going to do something to prevent that or make that itchy go away. Someone who's using drugs, they're typically not too concerned about this self-care routine. They're more concerned about where am I going to get my drugs? I haven't had drugs. Where am I going to get money to get the drugs? What am I going to do to get drugs? How am I going to get this? Right. So they don't care too much. And that's why the scabs build up. Constipation. So individuals who use opioids are going to have constipation issues. So you're going to see when they finally do go to the restroom, they produce large stools. It's really important. So if your youth isn't going to the restroom, if they're not going number 2, to put it in nicer terms, if they're not going number 2, and it's been a week, and then they finally go number 2, and they create what looks like a giant football or what looks like a big ball of feces, that might be a sign for you that they may be doing. Now, in that picture, we have those little blue pills. That's what they look like in a firearm, right? Because a lot of these individuals, a lot of these cases involve firearms or they involve money changing and exchanging. Now, really important when we talk about fentanyl, it doesn't always just come in a pill. So that green powder is actually fentanyl that you see there. So that's actually fentanyl. Sometimes it comes in a white powder. This one's green. Those are blue pills. Sometimes those little blue pills are actually white. So they come in a whole bunch of different shapes, forms, and sizes. So that's why when we talk to youth or when you have these conversations with youth, it's important to explain to them that it isn't just always a blue pill. It isn't just always a white powder. It could be a lot of different things. And when they share food or when they share things, it's really important that they know what they're taking. Now, before we get into the video, I'm going to talk this last part about fentanyl and about opioids because we get this question a lot. So just like the Narcan, we get questions about treatment or we get questions about harm reduction or even the weaning process. What does that look like? So treatment for these come in a whole bunch of different shapes, forms, and sizes. At the end, we're going to give some phone numbers. But self-help groups or self-counseling groups like Narcotics Anonymous are a good resource for a lot of individuals. For individuals that might not be enough, they actually have a medication called methadone, and it's a replacement treatment therapy where they start off on a certain amount and slowly they start tapering off the amount of methadone that they intake or that they take. That green picture that I have there, that's one of the medications. So it mimics the opioid receptors in the body through a liquid form, and it gives them a feeling of it, and slowly but surely they can wean themselves off. Heroin, opioids are very very addicting. because of the way they work in the body. Just like you probably heard in the past, the cigarettes and nicotine are also very addicting. These drugs are also very addicting, just like methamphetamines. So getting off of these products for a lot of individuals, it isn't just a one day you're done and you stop. For a lot of these individuals, it takes a while, it takes time. So when we talk about lethal doses or lethal amounts, those little three cylinders there are the lethal amount of fentanyl and carfentanil. Carfentanil is actually an elephant tranquilizer. So that one little grain that you see there, yes, that is not a misprint. That is one grain in that carfentanil tube, and that is enough to kill a human being. And we're constantly seeing cases of fentanyl. I think last year, if I remember correctly, the youngest person that died in Santa Clara County was out of Los Gatos, and the young person was 12 years old. We're seeing, and it's not just something that, oh, this is something that's happening in certain neighborhoods or certain towns. No, we're seeing this Palo Alto, I think, just had one not too long ago. Los Gatos here in San Jose, it's all over, right? And we're seeing even recently, I don't know if you saw in the news, they just prosecuted 3 young people because it happened in Pacific Grove. So even in areas where people would say, oh, well, that wouldn't happen here, that wouldn't happen to my kid. Young people are young people, and they're going to experiment or they're going to take risks. So it's important when we have these conversations with them to say, well, why is it that you're really taking this risk? What is it that you're missing, or what is it that you're not getting that you feel that you need to get it from a prescription medication, or you feel that you need to get it from drugs? And I think ultimately that's a really important goal, and that's the big conversation here, right? And we're going to talk about some of those other things. So what I'm going to show now is I'm going to show a video. Hopefully it plays, hopefully it works. In this video, I am not going to talk very much. I'm going to let the video play by itself. This is for you all as adults to see what someone under the influence of opioids looks like. So if your youth comes home and they're exhibiting some of these signs, hopefully the audio works. If you hear the voices, if you hear the speech patterns, and that's what your youth is sounding like, it might be a good time to start having these counseling conversations. So I'm going to try to play this video, and hopefully this will cooperate with me. So let's see.
Hello, is he gonna say something back? Anything else for you, baby? Got it. Okay, why is this messed up like this? You got all that on there? Yeah, I ain't, it's short. No, you can't be. 5, 2, 6 left. Yeah, we got a suicide. Here. It came off for a bus. Back it. You're crying.
So really important to note some of the behaviors, the very slowed movements, the very slowed speech patterns. If you notice when she was trying to do the bag, that plastic bag, it's very slow. It's very kind of all really slowed. In their mind, they're actually going full speed. So in their mind, they're actually moving at normal speed. And us, we can tell, we say, hey, that looks like something's off with what's going on. So when you have a young person come home, we always tell everyone, make sure you're there. Right. I know sometimes people want to fall asleep, or sometimes people say, well, I need to go to work the next day. But be there when they get there, so you can see what they smell like. You can give them a hug. You can see if maybe they're not responding to you correctly, or if things don't seem right. We already talked a little bit about this when we talk about the cycle, but let's kind of delve deeper into how to have this conversation or what this looks like. So what makes someone prone to addiction? There's a lot of different things. There's a lot of different factors. Through science, we're finding a lot of different things. So I know that being up there for a lot of people right now, it might be saying, well, what does this mean? What are you talking about? So let's explain some of this. And that's why we always like to do these presentations and not just give people our PowerPoints, right? Because if you were to look at that, you would say, what? What do you mean? So let's explain. So genetics. How many of you know somebody who has diabetes in your family? My grandma. How many of you know somebody in your family who has high blood pressure or cholesterol? My dad. Does that mean I'm going to have diabetes and high blood pressure or cholesterol? No, right? Now, if I go and drink a 2 liter of Coca-Cola every day, am I more likely to develop diabetes than somebody who does not have that in their family? Probably. If I eat 2 to 3 Big Macs a day, am I more than likely to have high blood pressure compared to other people who don't have that in their genetics? Yes, probably. So I do the proactive steps. I'm not drinking a 2 liter or 2 a day. I do the proactive steps. I'm not eating 2 or 3 Big Macs a day. But all of this is because people told me. People told me, hey, this is in your blood. This is in your genetics. Maybe you should be a little careful with what you eat and what you don't eat, right? Same thing with drugs and alcohol. Not everybody in their family is going to be an alcoholic or a drug addict. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you know this is something that's in your genetics, if you know this is something that's in your family, talk to your youth about it. If you're not having the conversation with them, I can bet you money that they're having this conversation with their friends on social media, or they're getting misinformation online. So please, if this is in your family, or you know that this is something that's happened generationally, talk to them about it. You're not going to do anything other than remind them of what they probably already know. And if anything, you're going to avoid them having these issues in the future, because they're going to say, hey, maybe I shouldn't drink that. Maybe I shouldn't hang out with my friends and have that casual, smoke a marijuana or smoke a whatever drug, or take that pill as a casual thing because I'm different. And it's important for them to understand that. Trauma, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that everyone who's had a traumatic experience is going to have drug addiction. That's not what I'm saying. What we know is that people who have trauma typically have emotional issues. With emotional issues typically comes a whole bunch of feelings. Typically what's going to happen is a young person is going to walk up to another young person and say, hey, so I heard you're having a hard time. Yeah. Hey, I know a thing that'll make you feel better. And they say, what do you mean? It's really simple. I'll give you this pill and you'll feel better. Your brain will stop going. Everything will feel better. And it's just one pill. I do it all the time. It's no big deal. And they say, oh, really? Yeah. And because they haven't learned proper coping skills, even us as adults, right? Sometimes we don't know the proper coping skills. Someone comes up with the magic solution, just like, for a lot of individuals, like for weight loss and stuff like that. They say, this will cure all your, okay, well, I'll do it because okay. And they take it. And then next thing you know, they start getting themselves into these cycles. The environment. So sometimes the environment isn't set up for them to win. What am I talking about? Pro-social activities, that's what we know helps young people not use. So if they're not doing anything that's pro-social or positive, they're going to have a hard time quitting or a hard time not getting into this, right? So if they're not in sports, if they're not in music, if they're not doing anything that has positive social feelings for them, they're going to have a hard time not using or having a hard time finding friends. We always tell young people what we know is only about 2 out of every 10 young people are actually using. So when they tell you that all my friends are using, it's important to say, no, all of your friends are using, all the other kids aren't. So it's important for you to understand that all the friends that you have might be the user kids. So that's why you say they're all using, because not all kids are using, and that's important to understand. So how does this progress, or how do people make progress with this, or why do people use drugs? We kind of talked about it already, but definitely it's the feeling of wanting to feel pleasure. We know that humans love to feel pleasure. That's what we're all about, right? Humans are all about feeling good. That's basic 101 about, you tell someone, hey, you're looking good today. Oh, okay. Oh, I look good today. Okay, thanks. People perk up. Glorification from the media and from others. So through music, through social media, through a whole bunch of stuff, they see this and they say, oh, well, it looks cool. I had a young person come up to me the other day and say, well, the rappers do it on TikTok and it looks cool. So, I want to be cool too. So I'm kind of putting two and two together and saying that that might be something I want to do. Lack of knowledge. A lot of the times when I talk to young people, they tell me, well, they just told me don't do it because drugs are bad. And that's all they've ever told me, my parents, or that's what adults always tell me. It's just bad. So don't do it. It's important to have these conversations with them. Just like we had today. I know it's a lengthy conversation. We always tell adults, you're in the power seat, you're in control, they know who's in charge. If you want to go for a week and have this conversation, you can have that. We're going to put some information also on a thing that is run out of the DEA, that's called Operation Prevention, that'll allow you to actually have some of these classes with them. And some naturally fall into the lifestyles I mentioned earlier, right? Sometimes the success isn't really there, or it's hard for them to get out of these lifestyles because they might see it as a normal thing, or they might already be dealing with it at home. So to them, they say, well, if this is what it is, this is what it is, right? It's like a lot of the young people that have never been to a university or a college. They just naturally have never seen that. And they finally go to one, and then they say, hey, I could go here. Yeah, I could do that. I can go to a college or university. Well, it's not that hard, or it's not that far of a stretch, right? So what can fix the issue? Really important. I think what we did here today is something that could really help. Education. It's really important. The more education that somebody has, the more knowledge and the more power they have, right? Because my dad always told me, you can lose all your money, you can lose all your material objects in the world, but you can never lose what you have inside your head, right? So it's important when you talk to youth. They can never lose what they learn. They can never lose it, because money comes and goes and jobs come and go, but this stays there forever. A shift in culture, right? So a lot of the times, it's maybe changing what's cool, changing what's really popular with the youth. I think the younger generation is doing a good job at that. What we're seeing with a lot of youth is they're actually changing some of the things that is cool or reasonably fun in their generation. It's a little different than our generation. They think dancing in front of a phone is cool. When if you would have told us back in the 80s and 90s, hey man, dancing in front of a phone is going to be the coolest thing, people probably would have said, what are you talking about? Why would you dance in front of a phone? But that's TikTok for you, right, in a nutshell. Demystifying what drugs are and how they can affect you. I think this is one of the big things where we need to have honest conversations with our youth. We need to have honest conversations about, it's okay to feel things, but how do you feel them properly, and how do you feel them positively and not in a negative way? And last but not least, as I mentioned, I'm going to add some phone numbers. I'm going to put these up for everybody. I know we're coming up to the last few minutes of this presentation. And I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And I also want to give some time for maybe some questions. So these are phone numbers you can reach out to get some help. Uplift Family Services, they do a good job of what they do. So does Allen Rock Counseling Center and a whole bunch of different people. Parent Project, if you've never heard of it, that's a program that's actually run out of the DA, the district attorney. And they get parents and youth in a program. And this is for the youth. The parents have tried everything and nothing works. They get them in a program. They put them together for a few weeks, and they teach the parent and the young person how to work together and make things better. The Santa Clara County Treatment Services, they have a triage number that you could call, which is that one. From there, they will direct you on who is the best person to reach out to. The Bills Wilson Center, that's for transitional age youth that might be experiencing homelessness or any kind of issues. That's from 18 to 25, 23, I believe. And they will help them find housing and a whole bunch of different stuff. Our hotline, so if you know anyone who's dealing drugs and you say, hey, I want to say something about it, you can reach out to that number. Typically nobody answers, but that's for a reason. That's so you can leave a voicemail, you feel comfortable, share information, and then we'll follow up with all our different units. Earlier I mentioned about Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. It's free for the most part. Typically it's addicts helping addicts. And they have a mentorship type of program. So they get someone who's been clean and sober for a while, and then they walk with the newer person and they help them get clean. Why do I mention these when I'm talking about youth is because they actually have youth programs. So they do have programs just for youth. So it's no creepy old guys, it's no creepy old people, it's just youth. And they can learn how to have fun. They go on outings, they go to different places, and they just have fun being youth, right? Which is a lot of the times the hardest thing when I worked at the residential rehab that young people would tell me is, well, it's not the same. I'm not having fun because when I would come to the beach boardwalk to the movies, I was always high, and I'm not high. So I don't know if this is really fun. Things aren't as funny as they used to be. So I don't really know if this is even cool, right? But this kind of gives them an outlet to talk to other young people and kind of share in these new memories and these new situations. With that, I will stop sharing screen I will open it up if anybody has any questions, comments, or anything. And I will also try to put some things in the chat. I don't know if I can, but I will open it up for questions or comments if anyone has any.
There's one question. Yeah, there's a couple of questions. Jorge, we are coming up against the 7 o'clock one that's
Mhm.
taking place in Spanish. But the first question is, if a parent suspects their child to be under the influence, where can we take them to get help without getting them in trouble?
That's a good. So it depends on the day and the time, right? So if it's the weekend, your resources probably aren't going to be as open as if it's during the week. I know that the school district has resources, so if they're at school, definitely talk to one of the school site counselors, talk to one of the teachers, talk to somebody who's at the administrative office. That's one of the things that's really important. A lot of schools are implementing alternatives to suspension now. So they're not technically suspending someone right away. They're actually saying, okay, well, how about let's walk together, and let's kind of go through a plan on how you're going to get better and how you're going to get sober. As mentioned earlier, some of those phone numbers that I put at the end of the presentation, if you go on their websites, they actually have 24-hour lines that people can reach out to or that they can talk to.
And then the other question is it legal to have a doctor send over the mail a medical cannabis card? And then sorry, I'm not wearing my glasses.
No worries.
And then they do over internet a visit and send cannabis card over mail. Is that legal for kids 18 years or old?
Oh, I think that might be like a telehealth situation. I don't think I'm completely understanding the question. I've heard in the past of people going to doctors and saying I have back pain, and then they get a card. Like I mentioned earlier, right? 21 and over is legal age. That also changed a lot. So in 2016, when the voters in the state of California made marijuana legal, a lot of those little nuances and a lot of little laws kind of changed with that. A lot of those little laws kind of changed. But telehealth, yeah, there's a lot of interesting questions about that. So yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Great. And that was the last question that we can answer before 7 o'clock. But I do want to thank everyone who attended. Thank you so much for joining us. Jorge, thank you so much for facilitating this very important presentation. And there's quite a few thank yous here in the chat as well. Thank you for the information. It's very valuable. We do want to share with you that we do have social workers and CUHSD counselors, as well as counselors, administrators, that can also assist you with any questions you may have. If you have any additional questions or you need any assistance, please don't hesitate to contact us at the school sites. So with that, thank you very much. And thank you, Jorge.
Thank you all. Thank you all for having me this night. And if anybody will be joining us for the Spanish presentation, you'll hear the same presentation, but I'll be speaking in Spanish. So thank you all for having me. Germán and other school site people at Campbell Unified have reached out to us. So we're always here to answer any questions that you all might have. So if you want to send them to Germán, he can send them my way, and then I can also try to answer them after this presentation. I was going to try to put my email in the chat, but I don't believe there's a chat because we're in a Q&A webinar format. So please send your questions in and I will try to answer them to the best of my abilities. If not, I will refer you to someone at Santa Clara County Behavioral Health who does good work over there. I know a few people there that answer a lot of good questions. So
Great.
thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.